Okay, everybody. So let's take a look at what we're doing today for the review. All right, we got some trig graphs. Let's start with this one. So we hopefully know that the sine curve looks like this, and the cosine curve looks like this. It just depends on where they start. 2 pi, 2 pi. Okay, so if I need a cosine, it looks like this. And I know it's going to be upside down, so I made it upside down. The amplitude is 3, and I need to fit 2 curves in the place of 1. To do that, I found my 2 pi divided in 2 parts. So each curve has a period of pi. So I graphed it in there from -3 to 3. I got 1, and I got 2 curves, okay? All right, number 2. Oh, there's a lot to do in number 2. Too many parts. So what I have to do, it's a sine curve. It's going to look like this. So first of all, I just graphed the basic 4 sine of 3x, and then I shifted it so you can see this. So I need 3 curves and the space of 2 pi. So I took my 2 pi and divided it in 3 parts. So each graph has to be within 2 pi thirds. Okay, so I went by pi thirds, 2 pi thirds, pi, 4 pi thirds, 5 pi thirds, 2 pi. Okay, so I broke it up into 1, 2, 3 parts. 2 pi divided by 3. I know that the amplitude goes from 4 to -4, so I got 1 curve, 2 curves, 3 curves, and then I moved it. So I have to shift it pi fourth. So if that's pi thirds, pi fourth is about there. So it's about a pi fourth. And then I've got to shift it down 2. So I took every important point, I went over pi fourths, I went down 2, over pi fourths, 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 down 2, and I translated the whole graph over pi fourths, down 2, and graphed it in. All right. Number 3, when I look at number 3, it really, if I can find the middle of this curve, I saw a sine curve, because I know the sine looks like this. So I start with the sine curve. I see the amplitude is up 1, 2, 3, down 3, okay. And then it looks like the width of one curve is going to be pi, so to find frequency, you take 2 pi divided by the width. The curve width gives me 2. So there's 2. There will be 2 curves. I put 2x. And the whole curve was bumped up 1. If you have a hard time figuring out what that number is, this value here called k is always the minimum plus your amplitude, which would be 1 is your minimum plus your amplitude, okay? The whole curve got moved up 1, okay? To do 4, we have to graph first the cosine. So the very first thing I did is I graphed 3 cosine of x, and remember the cosine looks like this. So I need 2 of them, so I know I have to go from 0 to pi. So the period's pi. So I graphed in 1, 2 curves for 3 cosine of 2i. Now the reason I need to do that is because the secant is the reciprocal of it. So the asymptotes have to be where the cosine graph is 0. So my asymptotes are where it's 0. And then I know the loops are just off of the cosine curve. Where cosine gets small, secant gets big. Okay. Number 4, again, because I can't count, these are on the unit circle. So if you get your unit circle, it occurs at -1/2, occurs at 2 pi thirds, and it also occurs at 4 pi thirds. We need both from 0 to 2 pi, so I use the entire unit circle. Okay. Now, number 5, or at least the first number 5, because again I can't count. Radian mode. I'm going to have to use my calculator, so I went to radian mode, took the tangent inverse of -1.3, and I got an answer. Now that is not between 0 and 2 pi. That's not between 0 and 2 pi. So my first adjustment is to be add 2 pi to it. And if you look at your sheet, your identity sheet, you'll see that. Whoops, sorry about that. So then I then took 2 pi plus that. My first angle is 5.37. Now my angle chart says take that angle and add pi to it. Take your negative angle and add pi to it. So my second angle is at 2.27. So you got to use your chart, okay? So then I turned over the paper, and what do you know? There's a second number 5. I was again I can't count. I solved for sine. I subtracted 1. I divided by 5. And then I took the sine inverse, because 1 gives the angle, gives me a negative angle. Again, I can't have a negative angle, so I spin it around by adding 2 pi. I get a 6.08. And then if I look at my chart, it says take the absolute value of that negative angle, which is going to be a positive 2.02. Add pi to it, and then my second angle is a 3.34. Okay, 6. I'm going to solve. First of all, I divided by 5, but there is no cosecant, but there's a 1 over sine. So then I have cosecant 1 over sine. Then I flip both, made it sine is equal to 5 over 7. Went to sine inverse of that. Used my calculator, and I got an answer of about 0.7956. That's my first angle. My reference angle, my second angle is, my chart says take pi minus that angle, and then I got a 2.34. So hopefully you have the chart in front of you, okay? I probably should have taken it out, but it's in the notebook, okay? 7. So to do 7, we want an angle of inclination. So if I were to take and draw a picture of what's going on in 7, you have a graph, got a point at 4, -2, and then you got an angle of 40 degrees. So here's your line. Now we know we have to use y equals mx plus b to get that. So if I start with y equals mx plus b, the slope is always the tangent of the angle, because tangent is opposite over adjacent, and slope is rise over run. So I took the tangent of 40 degrees, but I had to change my mode, degree mode, degree mode. So tangent of 40 degrees in degree mode, and I got 0.84. That's the slope. It has to go through the 0.42, which has an x and y value. I put my 4 in for x and my -2 for y, and I solved it. I multiplied 4 times 0.84, I got a 3.36. I subtracted that, and I got a -5.36. So now I know b, and I know m, so my equation is y equals 0.84x minus a 5.36, which kind of corresponds to what I have here, okay? All right. Now, number 8 is our tide problem. I made a graph. At 2 o'clock, we're at 3 feet. And at 11 o'clock, we're at -1 feet. So the width from high tide to low tide is 9 hours. So to do it again from low tide to high tide is another 9 hours. So the period of this is 18 hours. Okay, so I like to call it a cosine because it looks, I like to start here, it'd be difficult to call it a sine. Call it cosine because it looks more like that, right? And so I start with a cosine. The amplitude is 2. If you're not sure how to get the amplitude, one way is to take the maximum minus the minimum divided by 2, and that will give you 2. Or you can find the middle of the curve, but probably max minus min is easy too, divided by 2. So the amplitude is 2. I need b, which is the frequency. B is always 2 pi divided by the width. Well, the width is 18 hours. So I reduce that to pi 9s, okay? Now the whole curve has been shifted 2, so I went t plus 2, and the curve has been moved up 1, so that's my plus 1. Now if you have a hard time finding k, this value here, this is always going to be the minimum plus the amplitude, which is be -1 plus 2, which is 1, okay? All right, now, if I want to find out what the height is at 0 feet, I got to go back and make sure I'm in radian mode because I'm using pi, and then I'm just going to plug 8 in. I use my calculator, I get about 0 feet. Okay, that's all I have. If you have any questions, come see me and I'll help you out, okay? That's what I got.